One of the biggest fears that people have when it comes to public speaking or speaking in front of others is the fear of blanking out. You're in the middle of saying something and all of a sudden you don't know what to say next. That is the biggest fear people have. But we can overcome that fear and we could put steps in place to help us minimize the possibility of blanking out in the first place. But we're going to do this using a two-front approach. The first way that we're going to combat the fear of public speaking is by analyzing our scenario. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. Now, the second front we are going to use is by using an outline instead of a manuscript. So let's go into our first way of combating the fear of public speaking, which is thinking of our scenario. Now, at first, this might seem a little daunting. This might seem something that takes a long time, but the more that we do it, the more natural it becomes, the more lightning fast it becomes. So what do we look at when we analyze our scenario? We look at three different things. We look at our setting, where we are at that moment that we're going to speak, who is our audience, and what is our objective in speaking. So let's think a little bit about our setting. Where are we? Are you at a funeral? Are you at a comedy club? Are you giving a presentation in a conference room? Or are you up in the C-suite talking specifically to the executives of your company? Our setting can determine a number of things. It could determine how loud or how soft we need to speak. It can determine our diction, our word choice, because the words that we use talking to C-suite individuals will be very different to an audience of people at a comedy club. We can also look at our tone. How are we speaking? Are we being excited? Are we being overly excited? Are we being too serious? And then also it affects our hand gestures, our body language. Knowing where we're going to speak can alter a lot of these skills that we work on while improving our public speaking. Now let's go into our second point, our audience. We want to analyze who is our audience. Who are they? What do they know? What don't they know? What are they expecting? Why are they listening to you right now? What are they hoping to come away with? When we analyze these things, we can tailor our approach, not only in the way that we write, but the way that we deliver our speeches. And then the third, which I think is the most valuable point, is our objective. What is our objective? And usually the objective, we don't want it to be complicated. It could just be a few words. What is it? Is it to educate? Is it to entertain? Is it to inform? Is it to comfort? And so forth. There are hundreds of different objectives. But when we analyze what our objective is, it helps us to know where do we want to go? What do we want our audience to get out of what we're saying? What do we want to get out of what we are saying to that audience? This will help us to tailor what we say and how to say it. Now, let's go over a couple of tips that can help us. For the fear of blanking out, we want to know our material. We want to know what we're going to talk about. And I'm not just talking about writing everything out, but really knowing what we want to talk about. The next point is to practice. We want to practice as much as possible. Tip number 3 is recognize that the audience is on your side. For the most part, unless you're in a hostile situation, the audience is going to be on your side. Nobody wants to sit through a bad speech. Nobody wants to see the speaker fail. So the audience is going to be on your side. So when you start thinking about the nerves and anxieties of speaking in front of people, just realize, hey, look, they're on my side. They want me to succeed. Now, if a blank out does happen, we can lean into it. Just let the audience know, hey, I lost my train of thought real quick. Give me a second. Okay, got it. The fear of blanking out affects just about everyone. So if you actually do blank out, the audience is going to be able to empathize. Just take your time, gather your thoughts, and keep going. Now, let's talk about one of the fronts that we are using to combat the fear of public speaking. And it's the second one. It's using an outline instead of a manuscript. Now, what's the difference between the two? In a manuscript, everything is written out, word for word, how you would say it in front of that audience. And that is great when you have to give information very specifically, maybe stats, figures, legal, maybe medical things, scientific things. You may want to use a manuscript for certain things because you want to make sure that the wording is perfect. But the problem with manuscripts is that they don't produce a very dynamic speech. It's not very conversational. It doesn't allow a lot of room to adjust based on the moment or the feedback that you get from the audience. That's why we use an outline. An outline is having a bulleted list of the things that we want to talk about. And we break it down in a very simple, logical manner. What is the theme of what we're going to talk about? Now, once we have that theme in mind, we can pick 2 to 3 different main points that support the theme. Under each main point, we will have perhaps a few subpoints. And underneath those subpoints, you might have some data, some information that will back up these subpoints and, of course, the main point. And that could be all broken down with bullet points. And I use bullet points personally myself because as I look down, it's very easy for me to pick out what I need to say next. Not everything is written out, but just the basics of what I need to say. Because if I know my material, just looking at a few words of my bullet point will help me to know, okay, this is what I need to say next. This produces a much more conversational speech. It reduces the amount of blanking out because all you need to do is look down very quick. You see a few words that meet all the requirements of the main point, the subpoint, the theme. You know your information. So even if you do blank out, all it's going to do is to take a few seconds to look at the information and you'll be good to go. And that leads me to another point. Sometimes we feel that 2 seconds up on stage is a very, very long time. But to the audience, that's nothing. They may not even know that you blanked out. You may think, oh, I blanked out, I did so bad. But the audience, they just thought that you were thinking about what to say next. They didn't perceive that you had blanked out. I use a bullet point for my outlines, and you can actually see it here. These are bullet points for my outline for what I wanted to say today. So when we couple analyzing our scenario and using an outline, this is going to almost eliminate the fear of blanking out or even the possibility of blanking out. Try these tips and let me know how it goes.